I'm Garrett, 37 years old, and I never thought I'd walk into my bedroom to find my wife entertaining 3 men at once. The look on her face when she realized I wasn't the pushover she thought I was? Priceless. Nobody knew about my past until that moment. What happened next changed everything between us. Before I begin this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned the tables on my cheating wife and her 3 handymen. Trust me, what happened next will leave you shocked. I met Rachel 5 years ago at a charity gala in downtown Chicago. She was 32, stunningly beautiful with long auburn hair and the kind of smile that lit up the entire ballroom. Working as an event coordinator at the Langham Hotel, she had this magnetic energy that drew everyone to her. I was instantly captivated. At the time, I was building my career as a business consultant, helping companies streamline their operations and increase profitability. What nobody knew, including Rachel, was that my business acumen came from a very different kind of training. Our connection was immediate and intense. Rachel was vivacious, outgoing, and seemed to thrive on adventure, qualities I found irresistible after years of disciplined secrecy in my previous life. We started dating, and everything moved at lightning speed. Within 3 months, we were practically living together. By month 5, I proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. 1 month after that, we were married in an elaborate ceremony that Rachel insisted was essential for networking. The wedding should have been my first red flag. Rachel invited over 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met. She spent weeks obsessing over every detail, from the custom-designed dress to the imported flowers. When I suggested scaling back due to costs, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand, saying, "Don't worry about it, we'll figure it out." The final bill came to over $85,000, most of which came from my savings. Looking back, there were warning signs from the beginning that I willfully ignored. At social gatherings, Rachel would disappear for periods of time, only to be found in deep conversation with some attractive man. She'd laugh too loudly at their jokes, touch their arms, and flirt openly. When I expressed discomfort, she'd accuse me of being insecure and controlling. "It's just how I am, Garrett. It doesn't mean anything." I believed her because I wanted to. Her spending habits were another issue. Rachel had expensive tastes and felt entitled to luxury. Our joint credit cards were constantly maxed out on designer clothes, spa treatments, and lavish dinners with her friends. When I tried to establish a budget, she would pout and withdraw, making me feel like the villain for being financially responsible. The worst part was her gradual erosion of my boundaries. In the beginning, she would at least ask before making major decisions. By year 2, she was booking expensive vacations and inviting friends to stay at our house without even mentioning it to me. When I'd express frustration, she'd flip the script. "Why are you so uptight? Normal husbands don't act this way." What Rachel never knew was that my uptight personality had been carefully constructed. Before becoming a business consultant, I had spent 8 years in military special operations, specializing in intelligence gathering and high-risk extractions. I had been part of an elite unit that handled situations too sensitive for official acknowledgement. The skills I developed, patience, observation, strategic thinking, and when necessary, controlled aggression, had saved my life multiple times in combat zones across the world. After a classified mission went sideways in Eastern Europe, resulting in civilian casualties, I made the decision to leave that life behind. I received an honorable discharge, underwent extensive therapy to process the trauma, and rebuilt myself as a civilian. I buried that part of my identity so deeply that sometimes I almost forgot it existed, almost. I never told Rachel about my military background beyond saying I had served for a few years. She never pressed for details, seemingly uninterested in that chapter of my life. I convinced myself this was for the best. A clean break. A fresh start. But while I had left that world, the training, instincts, and capabilities remained dormant within me. By our 4th anniversary, our marriage had deteriorated significantly. Rachel's disrespect had become routine. She would openly criticize me in front of friends, make cutting remarks about my earning potential, and compare me unfavorably to her successful clients. Our sex life had dwindled to occasional, perfunctory encounters that left both of us unsatisfied. Then came the changes that even my deliberate denial couldn't ignore. Rachel started coming home later and later, claiming extended work events or drinks with colleagues. She became protective of her phone, changing the password and angling the screen away whenever I came near. There were hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. New friends, whose names she mentioned but whom I never met. The credit card statements showed charges at restaurants and hotels on days she claimed to be working late. Unfamiliar cologne sometimes lingered on her clothes. Jewelry appeared that I hadn't gifted her. When confronted, Rachel had plausible explanations for everything, delivered with just the right amount of indignation to make me feel ashamed for asking. Part of me knew what was happening, but another part, the part that had committed to leaving violence and confrontation behind, kept me from digging deeper. I told myself that marriage was about trust and that my suspicions were just paranoia bleeding over from my former life. I was determined to make this normal, civilian life work, even as it crumbled around me. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't just turning a blind eye to Rachel's infidelity. I was suppressing my own nature, the observant, strategic, decisive person I had been trained to be. In trying to bury my past, I had buried essential parts of myself. Rachel had never truly known me, because I had never allowed her to see the real Garrett beneath the carefully constructed facade of normalcy. That all changed the day I came home early and found my wife with 3 men in our bedroom. It started as an ordinary Tuesday. I arrived at my office downtown around 7:30 a.m., reviewing materials for an important presentation to a potential client in the healthcare sector. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., giving me ample time to finalize my proposal and rehearse my talking points. Around noon, I received an email from the client's assistant. The CEO had a family emergency and needed to reschedule. Suddenly, my afternoon was clear. Under normal circumstances, I would have used those extra hours to catch up on other work. But something felt different that day. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of suspicion, or perhaps my subconscious had picked up on patterns I wasn't consciously acknowledging. Whatever the reason, I decided to surprise Rachel by coming home early. On the drive home, I stopped at a florist and purchased a bouquet of lilies, Rachel's favorite. Part of me hoped that my suspicions were unfounded, that a romantic gesture might help us reconnect and address the growing distance between us. Another part, the part one had tried to silence for years, was preparing for a different scenario entirely. As I turned onto our street in the upscale North Shore suburb, I immediately noticed 3 unfamiliar vehicles parked near our house. A white work van with Bradley's Premium Plumbing painted on the side, a blue pickup truck with a toolbox, and a sleek black Audi that seemed out of place among the service vehicles. My pulse quickened, but my breathing remained steady, an automatic response from years of training. I parked 2 houses down, a habit from surveillance operations that I'd never quite shaken. As I approached our 2-story colonial home, I could hear music playing, not the classical or jazz that Rachel usually preferred, but something with a heavy bass line. Beneath the music, I detected multiple voices and laughter. Rather than using the front door, I entered through the side entrance that led to the kitchen. The house smelled of unfamiliar cologne and expensive whiskey, the special reserve bourbon I kept for rare occasions. I set the flowers on the counter and moved silently through the house, my footsteps automatically finding the quiet spots on our hardwood floors. The sounds grew louder as I approached the staircase. I could clearly distinguish Rachel's distinctive laugh, the one she used when she was flirting, mingled with male voices. Someone made a comment I couldn't quite catch, followed by a chorus of appreciative male laughter and Rachel shushing them playfully. As I ascended the stairs, my mind automatically catalogued potential scenarios and responses. The old training kicked in effortlessly: assess the situation before acting, identify threats, control the environment, maintain tactical advantage. I felt an odd calm settling over me, a familiar mental state from operations where emotions became secondary to objectives. Outside our bedroom door, I paused. Through the partially open door, I could see reflections in the mirrored closet, unfamiliar male figures moving around our king-sized bed. Rachel's voice came through clearly now. "You boys are so much more fun than my boring husband. He doesn't know how to have a good time." I pushed the door open fully, taking in the scene in an instant. Rachel was sprawled across our bed wearing nothing but black lingerie, expensive pieces I had never seen before. Around her were three men in various states of undress. On her left was a muscular man with a sleeve tattoo and a plumber's tool belt discarded on the floor beside him. On her right was a taller, leaner man with a short beard who was holding an electrical tester in one hand and a glass of my bourbon in the other. Standing at the foot of the bed was a third man, older than the others, with carpenter's tools scattered on my dresser. The room reeked of alcohol and the remnants of my wife's perfume. On the nightstand were several empty glasses and my bottle of 23-year-old Pappy Van Winkle bourbon, a rare gift from a grateful client that now was 3/4 empty. For a fraction of a second, everyone froze. Then Rachel's expression shifted from shock to something else entirely, a smirk of defiance. She didn't move to cover herself or show any sign of embarrassment. Instead, she stretched languidly and said, "Oh, hubby's home. Gonna watch or walk away like always?" The three men exchanged glances, initially uncertain, then relaxing when Rachel showed no alarm. The plumber, Bradley, according to the name stitched on his uniform shirt, gave me a dismissive once-over. "This the husband? Thought you said he'd be gone all day." Bradley said, not to me but to Rachel, as if I wasn't worth addressing directly. "He usually is," Rachel replied, rolling her eyes. "Garrett, meet the guys fixing up the house while you're busy with your boring job. This is Bradley, Charles, and Frederick." Charles, the electrician, raised his glass in a mocking toast. "Nice bourbon, man. Really smooth." Frederick, the carpenter, didn't even bother acknowledging me. He simply poured himself another drink from my bottle, maintaining eye contact with Rachel the whole time. "What's going on here, Rachel?" I asked, my voice neutral, giving nothing away. Rachel sat up, an exaggerated pout on her lips. "Just having some fun with real men for a change. These guys know how to handle their tools." She ran her fingers along Bradley's arm, watching for my reaction. "What are you going to do about it, Garrett? Sulk and then go sleep in the guest room like you always do when we fight?" Bradley snickered. "Sounds like a real alpha male you got there, Rachel." Charles joined in. "Yeah, no wonder you called us. Some jobs require professional equipment." He glanced suggestively at his crotch, eliciting giggles from Rachel. Frederick simply watched the scene unfold, a smug smile playing at his lips as he casually drank my bourbon as if he owned the place. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Not rage, I had been trained too well for that, but a cold, focused clarity. These people had invaded my home, disrespected my marriage, and were now attempting to humiliate me. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to maintain the facade. I closed the bedroom door behind me and turned the lock with a soft click. The sound of the lock engaging caught everyone's attention. Frederick's smug smile faltered slightly. Charles stopped mid-sip. Bradley's posture stiffened. Only Rachel seemed unfazed, her challenging smirk still in place as she watched me with curious amusement. Outwardly, I remained calm, but internally, I was running a full tactical assessment. 3 males, likely unarmed but physically fit. Multiple potential improvised weapons in the room. One exit through the bedroom door, another through the ensuite bathroom window, though that would require navigating a 2-story drop. Rachel, unpredictable but not a physical threat. Objective, control the situation without escalation to violence. "You know, darling," I said, my voice softer than usual. "I think it's time you learned the truth about who I really am." Rachel's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't the reaction she had expected, not hurt, not anger, not passive retreat. Something in my tone made her sit up straighter. What, that you're even more pathetic than I thought? She attempted to salvage her advantage, but I could hear the slight tremor in her voice. Frederick laughed, but it sounded forced. Listen, man, this is between you and your wife. We were just… Setting down that glass would be your first good decision today, I interrupted, my eyes locked on his. My voice had changed, dropping into the command tone I'd used during operations. Put it down, step away from the dresser, and sit on the edge of the bed. Now. Frederick blinked, momentarily confused by the authority in my voice. Then he snorted and raised the glass to his lips again. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? In one fluid motion, I crossed the room, removed the glass from his hand, set it on the dresser, and applied subtle pressure to a nerve point in his wrist. To everyone else, it would have looked like I simply took the glass and guided him toward the bed. Only Frederick felt the precise, expertly applied pressure that sent shooting pain up his arm without leaving a mark. His knees buckled, and he sat heavily on the bed, his eyes wide with confusion and the first flickers of fear. What the? Bradley started, stepping forward aggressively. You can't just… I pivoted, using Bradley's forward momentum against him. A simple redirection of force, a strategic placement of my foot, and suddenly the muscular plumber was off balance, stumbling backward until his legs hit the bed and he sat down hard next to Frederick. Charles, witnessing what happened to his friends, made a break for the bathroom. I intercepted him with 3 quick strides, blocking his path without touching him. Back to the bed, Charles, I said quietly. Unless you'd prefer to explain to the emergency room doctor how you broke your arm falling out of my second-story window. The electrician's face paled. He retreated to the bed, sitting beside the others. Rachel's amusement had vanished completely, replaced by confusion and the first hints of fear. Garrett, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? On the contrary, I replied, positioning myself between them and the door. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. I looked at each of them in turn, noting their expressions, Frederick's calculation as he reassessed the threat I posed, Bradley's simmering anger masking his uncertainty, Charles's obvious fear, and Rachel's growing realization that she had severely misjudged the situation. Let me introduce myself properly, I continued, my voice level and controlled. Before I became a business consultant, I spent 8 years in military special operations. My specialty was extracting high-value targets from hostile environments, gathering intelligence through enhanced interrogation, and neutralizing threats with minimal collateral damage. I watched recognition dawn on their faces. The understanding that they weren't dealing with the pushover husband Rachel had described. That's bullshit, Bradley attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. You're making that up to scare us. Would you like a demonstration? I asked, not as a threat but as a genuine offer. I can dislocate your shoulder in a way that requires no strength on my part, leaves no visible bruising, and causes pain comparable to childbirth. It would take approximately 3 seconds. Bradley's face drained of color. He shook his head quickly. Smart choice. I nodded. Now, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have an honest conversation about what's been going on in my house, behind my back, with my wife. You will answer truthfully, or I will know. Deception detection was part of my training. You can't keep us here, Charles protested weakly. That's kidnapping or something. I'm not keeping you anywhere, I clarified. The door is locked for privacy, not imprisonment. Any of you are free to leave after our conversation. But consider this, if you choose to leave before we resolve this situation, I'll have to assume you're a continued threat to my home and marriage. Frederick, sharper than the others, caught my meaning. We're not a threat. This was just, it wasn't what it looked like. Rachel finally found her voice. Garrett, stop this ridiculous act. So what if you were in the military? That doesn't give you the right to threaten my friends. Friends? I echoed, turning my attention to her. Is that what we're calling them? Let's clarify the nature of these friendships. I moved to the nightstand and picked up Rachel's phone. She lunged for it, but I easily sidestepped her. Give me my phone! You have no right! She demanded. Actually, as it was purchased on our family plan and is registered in my name, I have every legal right, I replied calmly. But more importantly, I think these gentlemen deserve to know exactly what they've gotten themselves involved in. I entered the passcode, Rachel's birth year, which she had never bothered to change despite her supposed secrecy, and began navigating through her messages. Bradley, I addressed the plumber. Did you know Rachel has been seeing Charles for 3 months? And Frederick for almost 6? Or were you under the impression you were her only extracurricular activity? Bradley's expression shifted from fear to confusion to anger as he turned to Rachel. What? You told me I was the only one. Before Rachel could respond, I continued. Charles, did you know that Rachel has been using the money you gave her for her car repairs to buy gifts for Frederick? And Frederick, those expensive dinners you've been treating her to? She's been recording them as business expenses on the credit card connected to my consulting company. The 3 men looked at each other, then at Rachel, whose face had gone from afraid to furious. You're lying, she hissed. They won't believe you. I turned the phone toward them, showing screenshots of conversations, photos, and calendar entries. I don't need to lie. You've documented everything quite thoroughly yourself. As the evidence mounted, Rachel changed tactics. She softened her expression and moved toward me, her body language shifting to the seductive pose I'd seen her use countless times to get her way. Garrett, baby, we can work this out, she purred. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to be the end of us. You know how much I love you. I stepped back, maintaining distance. That might have worked before today, Rachel. It won't work now. Her expression hardened instantly. Fine. You want to play tough guy? How about I tell everyone about your precious little secret? How you wake up screaming some nights? How you flinch at loud noises? You think your clients would still respect you if they knew you were damaged goods? First, I replied evenly, that would be difficult to prove. Second, PTSD from military service isn't the career ender you seem to think it is. And third, you'd have to explain why you were using your husband's trauma as blackmail material while cheating on him with multiple partners. Rachel's face flushed with anger as she realized her threats held no power. She tried one last angle. I've known all along who you really were. I've been playing along with your little normal life fantasy. I studied her face for a moment, then asked, what was my unit designation? She blinked, caught off guard. What? Simple question. If you've known all along about my military background, you would know my unit designation. It was. She stammered. What theater was my last operation in? What rank did I hold when I was discharged? What's the name of even one person I served with? With each question, Rachel's bluff became more apparent. The 3 men watched the exchange with growing unease, realizing they had been dragged into something far more complicated than a simple affair. Enough questions, I concluded. It's clear you know nothing about my past because you never cared enough to ask. I turned back to the 3 contractors. Now, gentlemen, let's discuss your involvement in this situation. The bedroom that had minutes ago been a scene of illicit revelry had transformed into something resembling an interrogation room. I remained standing while the 3 contractors sat uncomfortably on the edge of the bed. Rachel had retreated to the chaise lounge in the corner, her earlier bravado replaced by sullen silence. Bradley, I began, focusing on the plumber first. How did this arrangement with my wife begin? Bradley glanced nervously at Rachel, then back at me. Look, man, she came on to me. I was just here to fix the leak in the master bathroom 3 weeks ago. She started flirting, offered me a drink, one thing led to another. That's not true, Rachel interjected. He's been pursuing me for weeks, sending suggestive texts after I hired him. I held up her phone. Interesting claim, considering the first text in your conversation with Bradley reads, you looked hot working on those pipes today. Want to work on something else tomorrow when my husband's at work? Bradley shot Rachel an accusatory look. See? I told you it was her. Charles cleared his throat. Same with me. I was just here to update the wiring in the home office. She kept finding excuses to come in and check on my work, wearing less clothing each time. You're both pathetic, Frederick scoffed. At least be men enough to admit you knew exactly what you were doing. He looked at me directly. Yes, she initiated with me too, but I didn't delude myself about what was happening. She told me you two had an understanding, that you traveled constantly for work, and she had your blessing to entertain herself while you were gone. An understanding? I repeated, turning to Rachel. Is that what you've been telling them? Rachel crossed her arms defensively. What was I supposed to do? You're never really present, Garrett. Even when you're physically here, your mind is somewhere else. You don't touch me, you don't see me. These men make me feel wanted. And the money? The gifts? Were those about feeling wanted too? She flinched, knowing I'd found her financial indiscretions. I turned back to the contractors. Let's see what else we have here. I picked up Rachel's tablet from the dresser and entered the password. Frederick, did you know that Rachel has been taking photos of you without your knowledge? Including some while you were sleeping? Frederick's expression shifted from smugness to alarm. What? Show me. I turned the tablet to reveal a hidden folder filled with intimate photos of all three men, along with several others I didn't recognize. What the hell, Rachel? Bradley exploded. You said those photos were just for you and me. You took pictures of us? Charles looked ill. Does your husband have pictures of me on his devices now? I have a fiancé. You have a fiancé and you're sleeping with my wife? I asked, my tone more curious than accusatory. Charles had the decency to look ashamed. We're going through some stuff. Rachel said it was just physical, no strings attached. I nodded, then turned to Rachel's purse on the nightstand, removing her wallet. Inside, behind her driver's license, I found what I was looking for: hotel key cards. The Four Seasons, I noted, examining the first card. The Waldorf Astoria. The Peninsula. Expensive tastes, Rachel. Who paid for these rooms? Before she could answer, I pulled out credit card statements from the drawer where I'd been collecting evidence for weeks. According to our American Express bill, you've charged over $15,000 in hotel rooms in the last 3 months. Care to explain that as a work expense? Rachel's face reddened. I needed somewhere to relax. You've been so cold lately. And these? I held up receipts for jewelry, a Rolex watch, diamond cufflinks, a platinum tie clip. Are these also relaxation techniques? Frederick shifted uncomfortably. The watch was a gift. You said it was your bonus money. We don't have joint accounts, I explained to him. Rachel has been transferring money from our shared investment fund into her personal account. Approximately $43,000 over the past 7 months. The room fell silent as the full extent of Rachel's deceptions became clear, not just to me but to her lovers as well. Rachel suddenly stood up, her composure breaking. Fine. Yes, I've been sleeping with all of them. And others too. Are you happy now? What did you expect me to do in this sham of a marriage? You're emotionally unavailable, sexually uninterested, and completely wrapped up in your work. Rachel, I said calmly, we've had issues in our marriage, and I accept my part in that. But nothing justifies what you've done, not just the affairs, but the financial betrayal, the lies, using our home like this. Don't act so high and mighty. She spat. You've been living a lie our entire marriage. You created this perfect husband persona while hiding who you really are. That's the ultimate betrayal. The difference, I pointed out, is that I hid parts of myself because I wanted to protect you and build a normal life. You hid your actions because you knew they would hurt me. Rachel had no response to that. For perhaps the first time since I'd known her, she was completely out of counterarguments. I turned back to the three men, who were watching our marital implosion with expressions ranging from discomfort to fear. Here's what's going to happen now, I said, my voice quiet but commanding. Each of you will take out your phones and transfer back every cent that Rachel gave you or spent on you. Bradley, that's approximately $3,200 according to these statements. Bradley started to protest but thought better of it when he met my gaze. He took out his phone and began the transfer. Charles, you received gifts valued at around $4,800, including that rather distinctive watch you're wearing. Charles removed the watch with shaking hands and placed it on the dresser before taking out his phone. Frederick, you've been the most generously compensated at roughly $12,500, not including the weekend at Mackinac Island last month. Frederick hesitated. I don't have that kind of money just sitting in my account. Then make a payment plan, I suggested reasonably. Unless you prefer I contact your wife about recovering the funds? The phone records show several calls to a number listed as home in your contacts. His face paled. You wouldn't. I would strongly prefer not to involve innocent parties, I clarified. But make no mistake, I will recover what was taken from me. One by one, they complied. As they did, I presented each with a document I retrieved from my home office downstairs, simple non-disclosure agreements I had prepared weeks ago when my suspicions first solidified. Sign these, I instructed. They state that you engaged in a consensual relationship with Rachel, that no coercion was involved on either side, and that you agree not to contact her again. In exchange, I agree not to pursue legal action for the misappropriated funds or inform your families, employers, or clients about these events. This seems extreme, Charles muttered, but he signed without further protest. One last thing, I added as they completed the forms. I'll need detailed statements from each of you about the nature and timeline of your relationships with Rachel. These will be necessary for the divorce proceedings. Rachel's head snapped up. Divorce? Garrick, you can't be serious. We can work through this. I looked at her directly. There's nothing to work through, Rachel. This marriage is over. For the first time, tears formed in her eyes, whether from genuine emotion or manipulation, I couldn't tell anymore. Please, Garrett. I'll change. I'll get therapy. I'll do whatever you want. What I want is for you to pack an overnight bag and be out of this house within the hour, I replied evenly. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow with preliminary divorce papers. Rachel's tears vanished, replaced by cold fury. You've been planning this. All this evidence, the agreements, the divorce papers, you've been waiting for this moment. No, I corrected her. I've been hoping I was wrong. But I prepared for the possibility that I wasn't. It's what I was trained to do, anticipate scenarios and develop appropriate responses. As the reality of her situation sank in, Rachel made one last desperate attempt. She lunged toward me, fingers curved like claws, aiming for my face. Years of training kicked in automatically. I sidestepped, caught her wrist with minimal pressure, and redirected her momentum away from me. She stumbled but didn't fall. That's assault, I noted calmly. I'd advise against giving me more leverage in the divorce proceedings. Rachel stood there, breathing heavily, looking from me to her lovers and back again. Finally, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine, she whispered. You win. I'll go. I unlocked the bedroom door and stepped aside. Gentlemen, you're free to leave. I suggest you use the front door and not return to this property. The three men couldn't get out fast enough, practically tripping over each other in their haste to escape. I heard their hurried footsteps on the stairs, followed by the front door opening and closing 3 times. Rachel and I were left alone, standing on opposite sides of the bedroom that had once been our shared sanctuary, and was now just another crime scene in the death of our marriage. After the contractors fled, Rachel moved mechanically to the closet and pulled out a small suitcase. Her earlier bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by a tense, brittle efficiency as she packed essentials for her departure. Where will you go? I asked, not out of concern but practical consideration. Natalie's, I guess, she replied, referring to her sister who lived across town. At least until I figure things out. I nodded, watching as she selected clothing, toiletries, and personal items. When she reached for her jewelry box, I intervened. The pieces I gave you, you can take. Anything purchased with our joint funds stays until the asset division is formalized. She looked ready to argue but then simply nodded, selecting only a few items. As she packed, I outlined the terms I had already prepared with my lawyer, a fact that clearly surprised Rachel, though it shouldn't have. I had always been methodical and forward-thinking in my business dealings. She had simply never imagined those skills would ever be deployed against her. The prenuptial agreement you signed is quite clear about infidelity, I explained. You forfeit any claim to my premarital assets and business interests. The house is in my name, though I'm willing to give you fair market value for any contributions you've made to the mortgage. How generous, she muttered sarcastically. I'm also aware of the $43,000 you've diverted from our joint investment account, I continued. That will be deducted from any settlement. Your car is paid off and in your name, that remains yours. Your retirement account remains untouched. Rachel zipped her suitcase closed with unnecessary force. You really have thought of everything, haven't you? The perfect tactical operation. Was this your plan all along? Marry me, wait for me to mess up, then discard me with nothing? No, Rachel, I said quietly. My plan was to build a life with someone I loved. To create something real and lasting. You're the one who made that impossible. For a moment, vulnerability flashed across her face. Then her expression hardened again. You never loved me. Not really. You never even showed me who you really were. Perhaps you're right, I conceded. But you never asked? You were so wrapped up in what I could provide, status, security, lifestyle, that you never bothered to discover who I was beneath the provider role you assigned me. She had no response to that. Instead, she pulled out her phone and called her sister, explaining in vague terms that she needed a place to stay. From her end of the conversation, I gathered that Natalie wasn't entirely surprised. When she finished the call, Rachel tried one last approach. She set down her suitcase and moved toward me, her body language shifting into the seductive mode that had worked so effectively in the past. She placed her hand on my chest and looked up at me through her lashes. Garrett, she said softly, we both made mistakes. But we had something good once. We could have that again. Let me show you how sorry I am. I gently removed her hand from my chest. That won't work anymore, Rachel. Not after everything I've seen today. Her expression twisted with anger and humiliation. Fine. You'll regret this. When you're alone with your precious control and your military secrets, you'll realize what you threw away. I'm not throwing away anything, I corrected her. I'm simply acknowledging what's already been lost. She grabbed her suitcase and purse. I'll need to come back for the rest of my things. Contact my lawyer to arrange a time. I'll ensure the house is empty, and you can bring whatever help you need to move your possessions. As she headed for the door, Rachel paused and looked back at me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw genuine regret in her eyes. Was any of it real? Us, I mean. I considered the question seriously. Parts of it were. Just not enough. She nodded once, then left. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of the front door opening and closing, her car starting in the driveway. Only when I heard her drive away did I allow myself to sit on the edge of the bed, the adrenaline finally receding, leaving me drained but clear-headed. Within an hour, I had stripped the bed, gathered the sheets and Rachel's lingerie, and taken them to the garbage. I opened all the windows to air out the room, removed the half-empty liquor bottles, and wiped down surfaces. It wasn't just about eliminating the physical evidence of what had transpired, it was a symbolic cleansing, reclaiming my space. I called my lawyer, Thomas, and updated him on the situation. He wasn't entirely surprised. I had consulted him weeks ago when I first discovered the financial discrepancies. I'll file the papers first thing tomorrow, he assured me. Given the evidence you've gathered and the signed statements from the involved parties, we should be able to expedite things. Rachel would be ill-advised to contest anything. She might, I warned him. Not out of any rational calculation, but simply to maintain control of the narrative. Let her try, Thomas replied confidently. No judge is going to look sympathetically on her actions, especially the financial aspects. Infidelity is one thing, misappropriation of funds is quite another. After hanging up, I methodically changed all the passwords for our shared accounts, credit cards, and investment portfolios. I notified our bank of potential unauthorized access. I changed the security code for the house alarm system. Each action was practical, necessary, and oddly therapeutic. By evening, I had transformed the guest bedroom into my temporary sleeping quarters. I couldn't face spending the night in the master bedroom, not yet. As I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For years, I had maintained a careful facade, suppressing my training, instincts, and identity in an attempt to be the normal, civilian husband I thought Rachel wanted. Today, when that facade finally cracked, I had expected to feel exposed and vulnerable. Instead, I felt liberated. The skills and mindset I had worked so hard to hide had ultimately protected me when I needed them most. I realized that in trying to bury my past completely, I had denied an essential part of myself. Moving forward wouldn't mean returning to the hypervigilant operator I had once been, but it also wouldn't require pretending that part of me didn't exist. There was a middle ground, a way to integrate all aspects of myself into a coherent whole. That night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, without the nightmares that had periodically plagued me since leaving the service. My body seemed to recognize what my conscious mind was just beginning to understand. I was finally at peace with who I was, in all my complexity. The house felt strangely quiet the next morning, not the tense silence that had characterized so many mornings with Rachel, but a peaceful solitude that felt like the first day of something new. The day after Rachel left, I took a week off work to handle the practical aspects of our separation. My first call was to a locksmith who arrived promptly to change all the exterior locks. Next came a security consultant who updated our home system, removing Rachel's access codes and biometric data. These precautions might have seemed excessive to an outside observer, but I knew Rachel's capacity for retaliation when cornered. That afternoon, Thomas called to confirm that the divorce petition had been filed. "Rachel's already contacted me," he reported. "She's claiming emotional abandonment and trying to challenge the prenup." "As expected," I replied calmly. "Proceed as planned." By evening, I received the first of many text messages from Rachel, alternating between pleas for reconciliation and vicious accusations. I didn't respond to any of them, forwarding each to Thomas instead. Eventually, they stopped coming. Natalie, Rachel's sister, called me on the third day. Unlike Rachel, Natalie had always been straightforward and reasonable. "I don't need details," she began. "But is it as bad as Rachel's making it sound?" "Probably worse," I admitted. "She was having multiple affairs, Natalie. And diverting substantial funds from our accounts." Natalie sighed heavily. "I was afraid of something like this. She's been different lately. More secretive. More materialistic. She's telling everyone you had a psychotic break and threatened her. I have video evidence proving otherwise," I informed her. "Including her own admissions." "That doesn't surprise me," Natalie said. "Look, I'm not taking sides here. She's my sister, and I'll support her. But I wanted you to know that not everyone believes her version of events." I appreciated Natalie's honesty. "Thank you. For what it's worth, I never wanted things to end this way." "I know," she replied softly before hanging up. By the end of the week, I had received calls from several mutual friends, each trying to make sense of our sudden separation. I kept my explanations minimal, neither defending myself nor attacking Rachel. Most seemed to understand there was more to the story than Rachel's portrayal of events. The second week brought the first significant legal challenge. Rachel's lawyer, a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney, filed motions claiming that I had coerced her lovers into signing the statements and that my military background made me dangerously unstable. Thomas handled it beautifully, presenting the financial records, text messages, and hotel receipts that established a clear pattern of deception. The judge was not impressed with their tactics, Thomas reported after the hearing. In fact, he warned her lawyer about making unsubstantiated claims about your military service. Called it borderline disrespectful to a veteran. Rachel's next move was to demand half the value of my consulting business, claiming she had contributed to its success through her networking and client introductions. This too was quickly dismissed when Thomas presented documentation showing that not a single client had come through Rachel's connections. Throughout these legal maneuvers, I maintained my composure and focus. I returned to work, explaining to my colleagues and clients that I was going through a personal transition but that it wouldn't affect my professional responsibilities. Most were understanding, and a few even shared their own divorce experiences. The financial untangling proved more complex than the emotional separation. Rachel had been more creative with her misappropriation than I initially realized, using joint credit cards to buy gifts that were later returned for cash, and lending money to friends who then helped her purchase luxury items. Forensic accountants eventually traced most of the diverted funds, totaling nearly $65,000, significantly more than my initial estimate. When confronted with this evidence, Rachel's lawyer finally advised her to accept the settlement terms I had originally proposed, acknowledging that continued litigation would only diminish what she might eventually receive. For weeks after the bedroom confrontation, I met with Julian, a former teammate from my special operations unit, who now worked in private security. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I had deliberately distanced myself from anything connected to my former life. "You look good, Garrett," Julian observed as we met for coffee. "Better than the last time I saw you." "I feel better," I admitted. "More integrated." Julian nodded knowingly. "You can't cut out a part of yourself and expect to be whole. Took me years to figure that out too." We spent hours catching up, discussing mutual acquaintances and his security consulting firm. When he casually mentioned they were looking for someone with my particular skill set, I surprised myself by expressing interest. "Not for fieldwork," I clarified. "But the analytical and strategic aspects, those I miss." "The offer's open whenever you're ready," Julian assured me. "We could use someone who understands both the operator mentality and the corporate world." That conversation planted a seed that would grow in the coming weeks as I reevaluated my career path. The consulting work I had been doing was lucrative but ultimately unfulfilling. It had been chosen primarily as a complete departure from my military background, part of my effort to create a new identity. Now, with Rachel gone and my past no longer a secret to be maintained, I could consider options that better utilized my full range of skills and experiences. 6 weeks after Rachel's departure, I decided to sell our house. It was too large for one person, and despite my efforts to reclaim the space, too many memories lingered in its rooms. I contacted a realtor and listed it at a competitive price, wanting a quick sale rather than maximum profit. The house sold within days, to a young family expecting their first child. As I showed them around, watching their excitement about making it their home, I felt a curious sense of closure. This house had been the setting for a chapter of my life that was now ending. It was fitting that it would become the beginning of someone else's story. With the house sold and the divorce proceedings moving toward their inevitable conclusion, I found myself at a crossroads. The carefully constructed identity I had maintained for years had served its purpose but no longer fit who I was becoming. It was time to create something new, not by denying any part of myself, but by thoughtfully integrating all my experiences and capabilities. I began therapy again, not because I was falling apart but because I was actively rebuilding. My therapist, Dr. Winters, specialized in working with veterans transitioning to civilian life. She helped me explore ways to incorporate the positive aspects of my military training, discipline, strategic thinking, calm under pressure, while leaving behind the hypervigilance and emotional detachment that had contributed to my marriage's failure. "You don't have to choose between being the operator or the civilian," she explained during one session. "Most people contain multitudes, different aspects of themselves that emerge in different contexts. Your challenge is finding the right balance and being authentic in all your roles. That resonated deeply with me. For too long, I had seen my military background as something to be hidden or overcome rather than a valuable part of my life experience. In trying to be normal for Rachel, I had denied essential parts of myself, creating the very distance she later used to justify her betrayal. As I approached the 2-month mark of our separation, I received an unexpected text from Frederick, the carpenter who had been one of Rachel's lovers. He asked to meet, assuring me he had respected the no-contact agreement with Rachel and simply wanted to clear his conscience. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a public coffee shop. Frederick looked different than I remembered, less confident, more subdued. "I wanted to apologize," he began awkwardly. What I did, was wrong. I've been doing a lot of thinking since that day." I studied him, looking for signs of deception but finding only genuine remorse. "I appreciate that, Frederick. But why tell me?" He sighed heavily. "Because I need to make amends as part of my recovery. I've joined a support group for people like me who chase excitement without considering the consequences. And because you showed remarkable restraint that day. Most men would have reacted violently. Violence rarely solves problems," I replied. "It usually creates more." Frederick nodded thoughtfully. "That's a perspective I'm trying to adopt." He hesitated, then added, "Rachel has been calling me." I haven't answered, but I thought you should know. That information wasn't particularly surprising, but I appreciated the warning. Thank you for telling me. And for respecting the agreement. As Frederick left, I realized that the anger I had expected to feel in his presence simply wasn't there. In its place was something approaching compassion, not for the choices he had made, but for the difficult work of self-improvement he was now undertaking. That evening I received a job offer from Julian's security firm. The position would utilize my analytical skills and strategic thinking while allowing me to mentor younger team members transitioning from military to civilian roles. It represented the integration I had been working toward, a way to use all aspects of my experience in meaningful work. I accepted without hesitation. 6 months after discovering Rachel with the 3 contractors, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. The divorce was finalized with surprising efficiency, largely due to the overwhelming evidence and Rachel's eventual recognition that fighting would only diminish her settlement. She received far less than she had initially demanded but more than she deserved, a compromise I accepted to expedite the conclusion. I had moved into a modern loft in the city, closer to my new job at Julian's security consulting firm. The space reflected my evolving identity. Clean lines and functional design balanced with comfortable furnishings and personal touches. No more pretentious showpieces or status symbols, just a home that served my needs and expressed my personality. My new role combined strategic consulting for corporate clients with mentoring programs for veterans transitioning to civilian careers. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways my previous consulting position had never been. I no longer felt the need to compartmentalize my military experience. Instead, I drew on it openly, using those skills and insights to solve complex problems and guide others through difficult transitions. I had begun dating again, cautiously and selectively. My therapist had encouraged me not to close myself off due to Rachel's betrayal, emphasizing the importance of emotional connection for true healing. I had taken her advice to heart, though I approached new relationships with greater awareness and honesty about who I was. On a crisp autumn evening, I was having dinner at a new restaurant downtown when I encountered Rachel for the first time since our separation. She was with a group of friends at a nearby table, laughing too loudly and drinking champagne. Our eyes met across the room, and her laughter faltered momentarily. After a few minutes, she excused herself from her table and approached mine. She looked good, expensively dressed and carefully made up, but there was a brittleness to her that hadn't been there before. "Garrett," she greeted me, her tone deliberately casual. "You look well." "Rachel." I nodded. "How have you been?" She slid into the empty chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. Oh, you know. Rebuilding. Starting over. She gestured vaguely. I'm working at the Ritz-Carlton now. Better position, better pay. I'm glad to hear that, I said and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish her ill. And you? She asked, eyeing me appraisingly. New job, from what Natalie mentioned. Yes. Security consulting. It's a better fit. Rachel's smile tightened. I bet. Using all those special skills you kept hidden from me. I chose not to engage with the bitterness in her tone. It's good work. Meaningful. She studied me for a moment, then leaned forward. Do you ever think about us? What might have been if things had been different? Sometimes, I admitted. But not in the way you probably mean. I think about how neither of us was really honest about who we were or what we wanted. That was the real problem, not just the affairs or the lies, but the fundamental disconnect. Rachel flinched slightly, then recovered. Always so analytical, Garrett. That's why I needed more excitement. You could have asked for excitement within our marriage, I pointed out. Instead, you chose deception. She had no response to that. After an awkward silence, she stood. Well, good seeing you. Take care of yourself. You too, Rachel. As she walked back to her friends, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Not just for escaping a toxic marriage, but for the growth that had come from its painful ending. I was more authentic now, more integrated, than I had been during our entire relationship. The following week brought unexpected news about the three contractors. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Bradley's plumbing business had suffered after several clients reported unprofessional behavior, leading to negative reviews online. Charles had relocated to another state after his fiancée discovered his infidelity, not with Rachel specifically but with someone else, a pattern of behavior that had apparently been ongoing. Frederick, true to his word about making amends, had maintained his sobriety and was rebuilding his woodworking business with a focus on craftsmanship rather than quick profits. Their trajectories reminded me that everyone has the capacity for both terrible choices and genuine growth. It reinforced my decision not to harbor resentment, which would only bind me to the past rather than freeing me to move forward. Around this time, I met Olivia at a veterans support event where I was speaking about career transitions. She was a former military intelligence officer who now worked in corporate security, someone who understood both worlds I had inhabited. Our connection was immediate and based on mutual recognition of the complexities we had both navigated. Unlike my relationship with Rachel, which had begun with intense physical attraction and surface-level compatibility, my connection with Olivia developed through substantive conversations about our experiences, values, and aspirations. She knew from the beginning about my military background and understood the impact it had on how I saw the world. Rather than seeing it as something to be hidden or overcome, she recognized it as an integral part of who I was. When I told her about Rachel and the bedroom confrontation that ended our marriage, Olivia listened without judgment. You showed remarkable restraint, she observed afterward, and wisdom in how you handled it. It was ultimately liberating, I admitted. Not just ending the marriage, but dropping the pretense about who I was. That's the hardest part for many of us, she agreed. Finding a way to integrate all our experiences into civilian life without losing the valuable parts of our military identity. With Olivia, I discovered a relationship based on genuine understanding and acceptance. We moved slowly, both aware of the pitfalls of rushing into commitments, but the foundation we built was stronger than anything I had experienced before. Looking back on that fateful day when I walked into my bedroom to find Rachel with the three contractors, I recognize it now as a crucial turning point. What had seemed like the ultimate betrayal became the catalyst for authentic living. The skills I had tried to suppress, the tactical thinking, the calm under pressure, the strategic assessment of situations, had protected me when I needed them most. They weren't flaws to be hidden but strengths to be integrated into my whole self. Rachel's betrayal, painful as it was, had set me free. Free from a marriage based on partial truths and surface appearances. Free from the exhausting effort of maintaining a facade that denied essential parts of myself. Free to create a life that honored all aspects of my experience and identity. What I discovered through that painful process was that true strength isn't found in dominating others or maintaining rigid control, but in being fully present and authentic in every aspect of life. It's about using your capabilities with wisdom and restraint, not to manipulate or intimidate, but to protect what matters and create something meaningful. So if you're facing betrayal or deception in your own life, remember that confronting the truth, however painful, is always the first step toward genuine healing and growth. Sometimes the most difficult moments become the doorways to our most authentic selves. I'd love to know if you've ever had to confront a difficult truth in your relationships. How did you handle it? What did you learn? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more insights about navigating life's challenges with integrity and courage. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that difficult endings can lead to powerful new beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your greatest strength lies in being authentically yourself, without apology.